Welcome back everyone, it's Chris, and in this video I'm going to show you how to add an Ajax search to a Django website. Up to this point we have been able to create expenses and we can list them here. So I want to add functionality so that the user can come in here and they can be able to search by amount. They can be able to search by the categories. They can search by the descriptions and all that stuff. They can search by dates. Okay, so the way we'll be doing this is we are going to set up an endpoint that sends JSON, and then from our application, we can now detect when a user is trying to search for something, and then we can send an API call under the hood of our server and then return those results and update the UI in real time. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started by setting up the endpoint. I'm in my views.py here, so I'm going to set up an endpoint here. I'm going to call it search expenses. Okay, so here, of course, we're taking the request. We are going to be able to accept a post request. So a user is going to be able to, if you think of it, a user is going to be able to send us like a key, maybe something like search value, and then the value, which will be what the user has input in the search box. So we are going to allow for a post request. So I'm going to say if request method equals post. So then we need to get everything that the user will be sending. So since we are going to be sending JSON over the network, we are going to need to import JSON just so we can transform it into something we can search by. So once you import JSON, now you can get everything that the user is trying to search for, like their search string, by doing, let's say, search string will be equal to JSON.loads. Then we are going to be loading in the data that we receive over the network. So we can get the data from request.body, and then the user is going to be sending us a key called like search values. But this can depend on what the user will be sending you. For us, we are going to call our own search text. So here we can do .get search text. And since we are going to be using JavaScript on the front end, it's common that we send it in this kind of casing, the camel case. But any is fine actually. So right here, basically what we are doing is whatever we send on the network, we want to transform it into a Python dictionary. Okay, so we're going to send an object from JS, and then here we want to transform it using JSON.loads to a Python dictionary, from which we can access a single key by doing get. So if this doesn't exist, actually this will crash. So if you ever want to stop it from crashing, you can just add an optional empty parameter. But for now, we'll be sure we'll be sending this because we are going to code the front end ourselves. So once we have this, now we need to query our expenses model. Okay, so for us to get the results, I'm going to store them in a variable called expenses. Okay, that's fine. So now this is going to be equal to the expense model dot filter. So we are going to be filtering by the fields here. So if you look at our expenses, you're going to see that we have these fields. So I'm going to copy them here, and then we are going to be filtering by all of them. So first thing is we are going to try to match the amount. So for us to match the amount, we are going to now do amount. Then we are going to use underscore starts with, then you set equals what a user is trying to search for, which we already have in search string. Okay, so what this one means now is we are searching the model where the amount starts with the string. So let's say if a user is trying to search for 1,000, for us we are going to look to be returning all the results where the money starts with 1,000. So if they add a 0, it means we are going to be returning the ones that start with 1,000. Okay, so next, it's also important that a user doesn't search for records that don't belong to them. So right here, we also want to match that the user who is going to get these results is the one that created them. So we can pass another parameter to search for. Now this will be the owner. So the owner will equal to request.user. Okay, so this will basically do the job to search by the amount. So for us to be able to get all the results that match in across all these other fields, we are going to duplicate this one a bit. So I'm going to add an OR operator. So what this is going to do is it's going to be getting the query set that is returned in here and then adding to it another query set that will be returned by this other filter we are going to write. So I'm going to copy this and then here, I need to tab this one back. So then here we are going to now search by the date. So the date, it's also important that the date we query by starts with, because that's when it can make contextual sense. So then let's go ahead and search for like the description. So I'm going to duplicate this one. So now here, when it comes to the description, we would want it to match like all the occurrences in that string. It's like that when someone says, I got money from a friend, when someone searches for a friend in that sentence, we can be able to retrieve that record too. So for us to be able to do that, we're going to use description underscore I contains equals to search string. So basically what this is doing is it's going to do a full text search on that string, and then it's going to, the I means case insensitive. So if you have like a D somewhere and then a user is trying to search for a small D, it's going to match that. So that's what this means. And then it can match across any part of the string, any word in the string. Okay, so once we have that, let's do the same thing for the category, and then I guess we'll be done for now. But then you can see like all the possibilities that are here. I'm going to try to leave more links in the description so that you guys can read more about these filters. Okay, so now let's filter by the category. Okay, so this one here, I'm gonna leave category contains, fine. We want to match the user, good. Okay, so once we have that, okay, I need to tab this one in. So notice that the user sends us JSON, so we need a way to send it back as JSON. The way we can do that is by using the HTTP response class. So from Django.http imports JSON response. So we can use the JSON response to format JSON that we can send back to the user. Okay, so what this is going to do now is it's going to contain query sets, and it's not easy to work with query sets, so we can send query sets over a network. So what we are going to need to do is on the query sets, there's a function called values, which when you call will return for us a list. So when you call values, basically what it does is it returns for us basically the values. Okay, so once we have this, now we can send it over a network by doing a return JSON response, and then we are going to transform response into a list. So you do list, then you can pass data, and then since we are passing a list and not a dictionary, sometimes it can fail to be serialized. So what you do here, you pass safe equals false. Okay, and that allows the JSON response class to be able to pass something that's not a dictionary easily. Okay, so now that we have the view set up, of course we'll come and test it as we are building from the front end. If there are any issues, we are going to be able to fix them then. Okay, so once we have this, now we can go back to our view and set up our form. So right here in our index.html, I'm going to scroll back to here on top of the table. I'm going to add a row, and then inside I'm going to have 2 columns. So one is going to take off 8 columns, and this should be call. So call md8. So I'm going to request for 2. Then of course I'll change the second one, take over 4, so that they are 12, And in the second one, now I'm going to set up a form. So here I'm going to have a form group, and inside I'm going to have a form control. So in here, actually this should be input, not just form control. Okay, so let me fix that. So input, form control, so I'm going to give it a placeholder equals search, just so the user knows what it does. So once we have that, of course we are not going to have like a submit button, but we are going to be able to search when a user is typing in his details. But you can as well add the button if your needs require that. The button to submit if your needs require that. Okay, so once we have this, if you go back to our view and reload, okay, we have been logged out, so let me log in. Oh, interesting. Okay, so now you see that we have the search view. So now we want to work on functionality to pick the text as the user enters it and then search this form. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to now pick this text. Okay, so to provide a way of picking the text, right here, I'm going to add an ID attribute so we can refer to it in the JavaScript. So I'm going to call it search input, search field actually. So I'm giving it an ID of search field. Now we want to create a JavaScript file that we can refer to. So right here, we need to load static for the content. Load static. So once we load static, now we can reference our static files. So just here, before the end block, I'm going to create a script. And by the way, you can write your JavaScript here, but then it's good practice to separate your JavaScript and HTML. So right here, I'm going to add the source. So source will be JS / I'm actually going to have a search expenses.js file just to do specifically that. But of course, you can always organize this better. But for now, we will work with it this way. So if you go to our JS files, our JS, so that should be in our main app folder, then static, then JS. So here we can create our file. So that's going to be search expenses.js. Okay, so now we need to pick the form, the search field. So we can declare it. So search field is going to be document query selector. So we're going to select this by the ID. So we can do search field. Okay, so once we have this, now we need to detect when a user is typing. So for us to detect when a user is typing, we are going to attach an event listener, which you can do from search field, add event listener. So the event we want to listen to will be the key app. So this is the one that gets called every time a user is typing something. So when it's called, we want to run a function. So it's called, basically it returns us an event. Now right here, we want to pick out what a user is searching for. So right here, I'm going to declare a value. So const search value. This will be equal to event target dot value, and this should be a dot. Okay, so this should return for us what the user is typing in every keystroke. So now right here, we can check if we actually have a search value. So I'm going to say if search value.length is greater than 0, then we can search. Right here, if it's greater than 0, I'm going to do a console log just to know that, just to check if we are still on the right track. Okay, so coming back to the app, I'm going to reload here. You can see that we are logged in. Let me open up my JavaScript console. We have an issue already, so it's not able to to locate our search expenses file. So for example, even when I type, nothing happens. So we need to look at that. So basically, if we take a look, if we closely take a look at how we are bringing in like the static files, for example, in registration, you note that we load static, which is one, and then basically the way we load our JS is we have to prefix it with static, and then we can load our JS. So right here, so I'm gonna copy this, and then I'm gonna have it here, and then we are going to replace it with what we have, just so we can have the syntax as correct here. So once we have that, if we come back and reload, you can see that the error is gone. If we start typing, you can see that we get the user search string. So now that we have it, we now have to make an API call to our web server, so that we can see if we can get any results and also display them if they are there. Okay, so for us to do that, we are going to use the fetch API. So right here, we're going to need to make a request using the fetch API. So I'm going to actually start up from something we did in invalidate usernames, just so we don't like spend a lot of time trying to write the same code. Okay, so right here we make an API call using fetch. So I'm going to copy that, then come over here, then have that code here. So we are going to be making an API call to expenses. The route is going to be called search-expenses. Okay, so we are going to be sending a search value. So this is what we are going to be getting here in search text. So we want to make sure that what we add here is exactly what the server will be expecting. Okay, so of course the value now will be the search value. And then I want to first trim it just to make sure that the user is not sending us like empty white spaces. So we actually have a search variant. So the trim basically will remove those white spaces at the end and at the start. Okay, so once we have that, we are making a post request. We want to now map it to JSON. Then another promise will return for us the data. So right here, I'm going to clean it up because we're going to be doing a lot of more custom stuff. So right here, I'm going to print the results, log the results, just so we can know if we are returning results. So let's go back and map our URLs. So if you go to our URL, our views.py, you can see that we set it up, but then in our URLs, we haven't added it. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, bring it up a bit. So the URL is going to be expenses search. Then we want to make sure it's matching here. So search expenses. Search expenses actually sounds more straightforward. So we want to make sure it's the same. And of course, we don't need this dynamic parameter. Okay, so make sure you have that, then have a comma here. So then the view is going to be search expenses. Then we can give it a name, a unique name also. So let's go search expenses. Well and good. Okay, so now let's test it out. So by default, there is only an issue that there's an issue that I've already spotted. Okay, so it's going to require us to send it a cross-site request forgery token. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the other decorator to actually not require that token on this view. To show you how it looks like, you see this decorator here. So this is the one we are going to use, and the way we use it is we import it and then we wrap it around our view. Okay, so let me import it here and then we wrap it around our view. If you look at our normal navigation, you can see that our expenses are in the default namespace. So when we are searching for them, like for example, like here, we are not going to need to prefix /expenses. We can actually search by just searching search expenses. Okay, so once we have that, now let's test out and see what we have. So if we come back to the view, if we start typing, you can see that we have an internal server error. If we come back to the server, we can see that it's saying type object expense has no attribute filter. Okay, so let's look at it. Okay, so we are saying expense dot objects. So this should be dot objects. You guys probably noticed that dot filter. So I'm going to make sure we are using it like here also. I'm going to make sure we are having it correct here. Same thing. Object filter. So yeah, I guess that's it. Let's try again. If we reload, so now if we search, you can see that we have another error. Let's look at it. So it's saying unsupported lookup starts with for float field or join field not permitted. Perhaps you meant to use I starts with. Okay, so let's use I starts with. So basically how that works is it's going to be able to search case insensitive, which actually makes sense in this kind of way. Okay, so let's try again. So there's another error. Let's look at it. Let me reload. Okay, there's another error. So this one is for the dates. So let's also use I starts with. Okay, let's try again. And by the way, since this is the front end and we are making the request using Ajax, we really don't need to refresh the browser to get the new changes on the server. So here, if we put D, you can see that we get the results. So we get data, and data has one item. So in one item, if we take a look, I'm trying to see what matches. Okay, so let me search for something like 1,000. Okay, so you can see that our results keep getting filtered. For example, here we had all of them, like on 10. But let me search for this value here. So when I search for that, let me remove the 0. You can see that we get 1 sent back. And you can see it is the one with the 3, this amount. So if we search for like travel, then we hopefully should be getting. So if you search for like travel, you can see that we get 1 item returned. And then if you look at it, you will see that the category is travel. Okay, so which makes sense. So if we search for a string like bro, you will see that we get 3 returned back, and all of them should have bro in the description. Actually, let me bring this one here. So you can see this one has bro in it. This one has bro in it. Okay, so this is how the I contains work. So it's going to search through the string. Every word occurrence in a string, it's going to search across all of it, which I think is something that is like very robust and very powerful. Okay, so now that we have the results being sent to us, now we are remaining with repressing it here. We are going to set up something. We are going to set up an output area. So an output area basically will be like a wrapper. So when a user is searching and we have results, we are going to take away this view and then show the output area. Okay, and of course you could approach this one in many different ways, but for now that's the approach we are going to do. Okay, so if we come back to our index.html, so first thing I'm going to put everything in the pagination in a div, because when we are paginating, we are not going to be paginating the results. Of course you could do it, but for now we won't be. Okay, so I'm going to create a div here. So div. Okay, so this one here, I'm going to make sure I wrap everything. And then this one, I'm going to give it a class of pagination container, just so I can have a way of hiding it when we are searching. Okay, so let me actually first do that. So in our register.js, or in our search expenses.js, right here we can say if we look at the result, you can see we get a list. So if we don't have results, still we get a list. So for us to know if we have results, we are going to be checking the length of this new returned array. So if data dot length, so we're going to check if data dot length equals 0. Then of course there we are going to want to show a user something. Okay, so if the length is 0, then we want to tell the user that the results were not there, which now we can do by setting up an output area. So here, I'm going to actually copy this table, the table we already have. So down, right here, I'm going to set up another div. I'm going to give it a class of table output. Okay. So right here, I'm going to remove the results. So I'm going to remove this row here, and we're going to be populating it dynamically. So first thing that I'm going to do here is hide it by default. So right here, I'm going to reference it. So const search out table output. This will be equal to document query selector. Let's select it by its class, and then we want to hide it by default. So table output dot style should be style dot display equals, you guessed it, none. Okay, so once we get the results, we want to hide our current table and then show this output table. So right here, once we get the results, we can say table output dot style dot display equals block. Okay, so first thing, we need to have a way of hiding our table. So I'm going to also get it and put it into a div. So I'm going to call it I'm going to give a div a class of app table, then have the table there. So now we are going to hide it when we have the results and then show the output area. Okay, so right here, we need to, of course, first get access to it. So we are going to select it by its class, which is app table. Okay, so I'm going to call this one app table. Then down here, now we can hide it. So app table style display equals none. Okay, so if the return results have no matching results, so in other words, if we have the length is 0, then we want to add something to the table output. So if it's 0, then we are going to do table output dot inner HTML. Then I'm going to add a paragraph that says your results didn't match. Okay, so I'm going to set it to no results found. Okay, so let's first test out what we have now. So if we come back and reload, we have the normal view. So if we start typing like T, you can see that we hide away our current table and then we show the table that should show our results. So right here, if we keep typing and then we don't match something, you can see that we have no results found. Okay, so which is what we want. Now let's go ahead and hide this pagination and then go ahead and populate them. Okay, so to hide the pagination, of course, we need to refer to it. So if you scroll down, you will notice that the pagination is wrapped into pagination container. So let's copy that, and then we need to, of course, select it. So let's select it by the class name, and then I'm going to call it pagination container. So once we start searching, we want to disable it to hide it. So right here, style display equals none. Okay, so that should hide it. So let's check again, reload, start searching, it's gone. But then our results are start searching, it's gone. But then we have a problem here. So when a user actually has cleared out the field, we should be able to present like the previous fields. So for us to do that, we are going to now see when the length of what is there is not greater than 1. In other words, here we are going to set up an else, and in this part we are going to now show back the table and then the pagination. So which you can do by app table display equals block, then also the pagination display equals block. Okay, so let's test that one out. Come over here, reload, start typing, it's gone. And then when a user clears out, you can see that we bring back everything. Okay, so notice that we still have no results found here. So we also want to remove when the user has cleared out the input. We will just come over here, also bring it down. You can actually do display style display equals none, style display equals none. Okay, let's check it out. Come over here, start searching, remove. You can see that everything is now working fine. Okay, so one last thing left is now to populate this data as it comes from the server. Okay, so for us to do that, we are actually going to start off by looking at what we have, like the format we have right now. So in the index.html, you will notice that in the TDs, okay, so in the TDs, you notice that we show this row and then the edit button. But for now, I'm going to be focusing on showing the results and not the action, but you can easily add that. So right here, once this is greater than 0, so we can add an else. Now we can select the table header, so which we can do. Let me actually put this code here. We'll come back to it. So if we come back to our search output, which is table output, which is here. So you notice that we have a table t body. So on the t body, I'm going to add a class just so we can easily select it. So table body. So now this one here, I'm going to come over here in our JS, refer to it. So const t body. So this will be document query selector. Let's select it, and then here we are going to have to append some rows to it. So right here, if the results are greater than 0, then we can do tbody dot inner HTML, then we can do plus equals. So here we're going to use these template rows because we are going to be adding some dynamic data from here. So right here, I'm going to add a tr, and then we need to add these tds. Okay, so cut it out. Okay, so bring that one inside. And now we need to bring in these dynamic variables. Okay, so right now we get an array. So before we even append to it, we're going to need to first loop through the array itself. So right here, I'm going to write a loop. So you can do data dot for each. Then of course this can have like item. Then inside here, now we can do this. So we can show a row for each item. Okay, so for each, then we need to close out this and remove it from here. So for each, we show a row, and then now we can show the different attributes. So right here, we can now add our dynamic attributes. So this will be item dot. So now we are going to match how we are laying out our THs. So the first one will be item dot amount, which we can do now item dot amount. The second one will be the category. So I'm going to copy this, have it here, also here. This is category. and then this is the description. Then the third one is the date. I guess the last one is the date. So we can put date there. Okay, so what we're doing, we are looping through each one of them, and for each one we are adding a row to the table header. So let's first take a look at what we have now. So when you start typing, okay, so we have an issue, data.forEach is not a function. So this should be for each. Okay, so let's try again. Let's reload here, put an S, and you see we get result. Right here, when we are making an API call, so when we get what the user has typed and then we are making an API call, the problem is we are not clearing out the previous data. Okay, so when we get data, basically we append it to like the element without clearing the previous one. So what we are going to first do now is here where we make the API call, we want to first clear out everything in the T body for our results. So we're going to do inner HTML, then we set it to an empty string. Okay, so once we get the data, then we want to be appending the rows. So here we can say plus equals, then the T row. So for each of these T rows, we're going to be appending one by one to our T body, depending on the results that we get. Okay, so let's test it out. So right here, if I come and put insurance, you can see that now it filters by insurance. If I search by test, you can see that we get test. If I search by money, you can see that our results keep getting filtered by those money values. So also, if we say we search by, like here, like bro, okay, so you see we get the result. And regardless, so in Django we use the I contains filter, so you can see it can search everywhere regardless of the case of the strings, which is pretty good. And then we can even search by the dates. So you can search by like an expense we recorded on 6th or 5th or 4th. So yeah, now the search is working, as you can